What's up, guys? BestGuyEver here, premier releaser of well-framed content. And it's time for day 5 of MIAMAFV 2!
Big Dick is back in town!
Bring me the bathroom! Because I'm an idiot!
How about we get, this guy involved right here. Everybody knows that if you're cool, you wear the hat like this. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about a subject that I've touched on many times throughout my videos and over on the podcast I do with Hypocrite, my One Piece review channel I do every week. When it comes to long-term One Piece readers such as myself, one particular element of the story stands out as perhaps the most controversial, at least in the circles that I travel in, and that is, of course, Haki. Haki? Are you talking about Oda? Ha 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 ha! No. For those who don't know, Haki is effectively willpower, and in One Piece, this particular manifestation of willpower manifests as a few very specific superpowers that everyone in the story has access to if they have enough willpower. The three main types of which are Armament Haki, Observation Haki, and the Conquerors Haki. Armament Haki makes you stronger and more durable. Observation Haki lets you sense attacks coming around you and speak to things that you couldn't normally communicate with. And Conquerors Haki lets you physically overpower the wills of other people, and basically that makes other people fall unconscious. That last one especially being a very rare one that very few people have, but in general, all these things are stuff that only higher level people who make it to, you know, the big boy world stage of things are generally going to find in their travels. And many people have made quite a few videos about Haki in general, saying it's good and bad and what's going on with it, but I want to give kind of a rundown of the history of Haki, and as I'm going, give my general thoughts on it. So for me, the first thing to point out about Haki is it was obviously not intended to be in the story from the very start. And this is where a lot of the criticisms that I and other people have seems to stem from. It's a natural consequence of something being added later. A lot of endgame characters like Shanks and Ace and even your Whitebeards and whatnot, we see them do a lot of things in the story before Haki really had a chance to develop and appear, and as a result, there are various retcon-y sorts of things that we feel throughout the story. The most famous one, of course, being Chapter 1 of One Piece, as Luffy is drowning and Shanks comes to save him from a Sea King that's about to eat him. Shanks sacrifices his arm and saves Luffy, and directly afterward, he scares off the Sea King with what we now know to be Conquerors Haki. So what most readers would notice about this situation immediately, if you were reading the series from the start now, nothing about this indicates that this was any kind of particular superpower that Shanks had at the time. It just seems like one of those anime things that happen. And that's really the thing about Haki. It is sort of the manifestation of many shonen tropes given a specific name in One Piece that all the characters potentially have access to. So in Chapter 1, the whole scare off the Sea King thing, that's sort of the anime trope of like the stink eye, the glare eye, the anime eye, Sharingan, activate! How many times have you and I both seen in anime and manga and whatnot, times when a character has done shit like this? I'm sure there's countless examples of it, of a beast or a man being like physically intimidated or forced to run away or step back when they get like a really powerful glare from an enemy. In some series you hear terms like killing intent thrown around with people being able to like sense that, and the glare is often a manifestation of that. Now, Conquerors Haki does develop later in the series, and we see more specific uses of it. There's the time when Shanks and Whitebeard first meet on their boat, and it knocks out much of Whitebeard's crew, except for the most strongest-willed members there. Makes sense, because as we've learned, Shanks and Whitebeard are some of the most powerful pirates in the whole world, and Shanks' powerful Conquerors Haki, especially when it clashes with Whitebeard, can do things like knock everybody in the ship out, and slice the very heavens above. Although that may not have been Conquerors, that may have been like Armament Haki instead, or potentially even some mysterious devil fruit. Don't worry about it. And just FYI, the first time that we start to see Conquerors Haki like tangibly doing anything with, I feel, the clear conveyance of the author that Oda had Conquerors Haki in mind and had Luffy doing things with it, is in Shabondi Archipelago when Luffy is fighting Duval and he makes his buffalo like intimidate and bow down. That to me seems like the first intentional moment where Conquerors Haki was used. And there are some people out there who say that Oda intended Shanks' eye glare at the very beginning of the series, Chapter 1, to be Haki all along, Conquerors Haki or whatever. I just think that there's no evidence for that, and considering the so many hundreds of chapters that passed before Oda made this sort of more clear in Shaboni Archipelago, I think it's fair to say that in Chapter 1, it was a trope being used effectively, and all of us understood what it meant, and it's only later that he decided to make it part of this package of powers. And if you want to say that Shanks is like the sleeper, most important character in the series beside Luffy or whatever, and so Oda, of course, would have intended that all along, I'd say fair, but I would need more to believe that myself. Moving on, let's talk about Observation Haki, which is the Haki type that allows you to predict attacks coming so you can dodge them real easily, and also seems to be used to communicate with things that most people can't communicate with or understand. Specifically, that's things like the giant elephant Zo that I think Momonosuke and Luffy were able to hear the voices of, as well as the Sea Kings in Fishman Island that Luffy was able to hear the voices of a little bit, and it was implied that Gold Roger had the ability to communicate with them, and we know that Gold Roger was able to read the poneglyphs even though he had never studied them, so it's kind of weird that he'd be able to read that language and write it, but he was. However, with what we know now about the story, it may have been that Kozuki Odin was with him, and he might have known how to write in the poneglyph language, because turns out those guys have some deep connections with it I won't get into. Point is, we know for a fact that Haki is used to communicate with other people, as well as see into their heart and understand people's true motivations, which is a power that Luffy uses a lot to make allies. And it's a little unclear, as it often is in situations like this, if this is just like Luffy's good-naturedness, or if it's Luffy's like willpower manifesting as Observation Haki that gives him the unique power to empathize with people. It's a little bit blurry. With all this talk of willpower manifesting as powers, there's gonna be plenty of room to kind of bullshit things and skew them to fit whichever way one prefers to think of them, so we're all gonna have our biases here. But the other usage of Observation Haki was just simply the ability to predict attacks, and later on we see this kind of develop and level up as Luffy is fighting Katakuri in the Whole Cake Island arc, who has such high level Observation Haki, he can see the future for a bit, and uses this effectively with his Devil Fruit powers to avoid attacks and all kinds of great stuff, which seem to indicate that there's different, like, tiers, or perhaps it's more of a gradient scale of how much of any given type of Haki you can have, with there being a clear differentiation between lower-level users of Observation Haki and higher-level ones like Katakuri, which Luffy also is learning and developing into as he goes along. Now, the interesting thing about Observation Haki is that it is kind of retconned a little bit as well, because there's a power known as Mantra, which we see in Skypiea, which a lot of Skypieans have, which is the exact same power as Observation Haki. You can sense the presence of people, and if you're really powerful at it, you can sense them like from a million billion miles away, and you can also use this to, predict the future, dodge attacks that are coming in from unseen angles, all that kind of stuff. And so again, since that was introduced in Skypiea, and Haki itself was only clearly manifested later in the Shaboni Archipelago arc, it makes one wonder, did Oda kind of cook up Haki later and then choose to fit it to these powers like the Shanks Conquerors Haki thing at the beginning of the series, and Mantra, which he repurposed as Observation Haki later and then added some extra powers to it? I don't know. People who are charitable will say that Oda planned it all along, and people who are less charitable might be inclined to say, well, there's no reason to believe that, with me in the latter camp.
Thinking about it a little bit more, isn't it kind of weird that it appears that the Skypieans are like genetically predisposed to have Mantra, aka Observation Haki, Haki meaning willpower? So is it willpower, or is it something genetic that you get? Or are all these people born with really strong willpower? I know that Oda says that different people are born with like a propensity to a different style of Haki, but if the foundation is willpower, surely that's outside of the control of just simple genetics, right? I don't know.
Anyway, the final type of Haki is Armament Haki, which makes you tough. This also has a couple of uses, the main one being you can coat yourself in black armor, which makes you tough and able to punch through Devil Fruit powers. That's kind of the main benefit of this ability. So if you're a Logia user, as there often are many in One Piece, and you have the ability to turn into an element and let attacks phase right through you, Armament Haki has the ability to force your body to kind of congeal out of that, and so they can still hit you even when you're in your dispersed form. In addition to that, Haki just makes you tougher and so harder to cut, and so if two Haki users are like trying to slash each other, a lot of the times it's going to be based on whose Haki is better, since that's going to determine how much punishment they can take from the other person's weapon. But there's also the ability to bestow Haki into your weapons, which we're seeing a lot more of in the Wano arc right now, which is a little bit hard to track and we're learning more about right now. But the way that Zoro and other people use it basically just seems like it's kind of a net attack boost on your weaponry. So Zoro puts him in his sword, it turns black, and he can slice you real good and cut through all kinds of stuff damn effectively. Presumably the main benefit of this being that with a Haki imbued sword, when you attack someone who's using Haki on their body to defend themselves, that your Haki might help cancel out theirs, letting you get the big slash going and actually deal some damage to them.
By the way, like with Mantra, Armament Haki had its own, effectively what seems to be a retcon, as in Wano it's been confirmed that the ability that Zoro learned back in Alabasta when fighting Mr. One about using a sword to be able to cut steel but to not cut paper, that ability is now called Armament Haki, or like the Wano derivative of that, which again to me just seems like a anime trope that has just been now reclassified as Haki. And we can again ask the question, was this intended to be Haki all along? To which you have already heard my thoughts.
We'll probably learn more about how this works as the series goes along, but that's what we know so far. And man, 20 years in, we're still learning new stuff about the fighting mechanics. That's actually a plus. I really enjoy it a lot. But there's something else mysterious that was introduced about Haki quite a while ago, and it's that, so I was saying that Haki, turns your skin dark, it turns it black as you do stronger attacks with it, as you imbue it into your various body parts for higher defense or attack or what have you. But this was not the case in early One Piece. The times we see Armament Haki early on in One Piece are Sentomaru using it against Luffy early on, possibly Garp, and maybe even Nami, because we see both of them being able to punch Luffy, who's made of rubber, with like quote-unquote fists of love, which is a little mysterious and might be played for laughs, but who knows? Garp, we of course know, is one of the strongest characters in the series, so that was probably just Haki. But the thing about this early usage of Haki is that you don't see any of the black stuff. It appears totally clear. It doesn't seem like they're changing color to do damage or anything. So there's a couple things going on here. My initial prediction, and what I've thought for many years, is just that, oh, well, okay, Oda hadn't thought of Haki yet. And so when he makes characters using Haki to do attacks against each other, they just didn't turn black because he didn't think of that property, which was only introduced after the time skip. And so when we see like Sentomaru from back in the day using his pushing, Haki imbued push, that was just, early Haki. But now in the Wano arc, we seem to be learning that Armament Haki has like different levels to it, kind of the way Observation Haki does. And just like Rayleigh, right before the time skip happened, used this kind of like projection attack that did not turn his body black, but pushed the Haki off him to deflect this big blow from this elephant. Higher level Haki might be clear. This one is still being explained to us, so I'm not going to try to pin it down just yet, but there are clear tiers of Haki, as we can see Luffy trying to level up his Haki game in Wano right now, implying that his black form is good, but this like clear higher level one seems like it would be better. But now, to give some other evidence about the unplanned nature of this, we see a lot of high-level characters right now who use Haki basically 100% of the time while they are fighting. However, a lot of high-level characters showed up in much earlier One Piece, and when they fought, they mysteriously did not use Haki at all. Why would that be? The standout moment for this is, of course, Ace versus Blackbeard on Bonero Island. This is a fight between the number 3 member of the Whitebeard Pirates, Portcullis Ace, versus Blackbeard, the sleeper final boss of One Piece. These guys are seasoned pirates, especially Blackbeard, and they definitely know about Haki. They are in the top tier of all fighters in the world. And yet in their fight, no Haki is used. And you could say that this is because Blackbeard and Ace are both Logia users, even though Blackbeard only got his recently and is a little bit weird. But Blackbeard even says that, oh, Ace, it must have been so long since you've taken a hit, as he, uses his dark devil fruit powers to punch him. Which, by the way, is specifically pointed out that it's his darkness devil fruit powers, that's what enables him to hit Ace. This really seems to reinforce the idea that these Logia devil fruits are just so good at avoiding attacks that even on the tippy top of power levels throughout the world, Logias reign supreme when it comes to avoiding damage. To me, this seems like pretty solid evidence that the Armament Haki idea did not exist yet. And now let's talk about the effects of the retcon, because the main thing about adding Haki later was, I feel, a way to counter these exact Logia Devil Fruit issues. We see several Logia users early-ish on in One Piece, of course, Crocodile, Smoker, and of course, Eneru and Skypiea, and with each of these characters, they are almost impossible to defeat for our big punchy rubber man Luffy. And those are the only tools he's got, his 2 fucking fists, his big fat ass, and his kicky feet. Every time that Luffy came up against one of these Logia users, he had to strategize a way to hurt them. With Smoker, he never found out a way to beat him, so he never did beat him in a one-on-one fight. With Crocodile, he found the unique weakness that Crocodile, when wet, as a sand Devil Fruit user, when he's wet he can't turn insubstantial. So that's the way that you deal with Crocodile, using water and later blood in their fights. Simply epic. And up against Eneru, the unique property Luffy has of being fucking rubber made him like a 1 in a billion odds chance that he happens to be the one person to slay the god Eneru, who thought he was so invincible. It was like the best thing that ever happened in One Piece, so let me calm down for a sec. And even later on in the series, when Luffy's up against Magellan, who's actually a poison Paramecia Devil Fruit user, but operates similarly to a Logia, being able to produce lots of it, it's Mr. 3 with his Candle Wax Devil Fruit that is uniquely able to block the poison from Magellan and give Luffy a bunch of wax punching gloves that he can actually use to hit the guy. So still, creative uses of powers being applied so that Luffy can actually fight these guys. That's teamwork, baby. That's the Nakama way. Enter Haki. First name, Armament. With the introduction of Armament Haki, Luffy now is a one-man show who can basically wipe any Logia he needs to. Karibo, being a Swamp Devil Fruit user, he was the guy introduced in the time skip and shown to be blown the fuck out by higher level pirates, in this case Peacoms from the Big Mom pirates during the Fishman Island arc. It was shown that Logias who get cocky get smacked down in the New World. A specific point was made to illustrate this to us. Haki changed the game. So why is it again that Ace hadn't taken a blow in months, years? Maybe he's just really careful and a really friendly guy who doesn't fight much. Or maybe he only fights mooks. I don't know. Press F for Ace, who jobbed every fight he had in the series. Rest in peace, brother. I mean, if you don't think this screams retcon, then, we simply disagree. But all this, you might just be saying, well, what's the big deal, bestie boy? Who cares if they introduce a way for Luffy to efficiently take down Logia users later on in the series, even if it clashes with some of the retcon stuff that we just need to brush under the rug because it doesn't make sense with our current understanding of high-level One Piece dynamics. That's going to be natural for a series that's over 20 fucking years old, and I would agree with that. I can accept some retcons without much issue. However, what I do not need to accept is the specific sacrifices that we're making as a result of this being introduced. One of the best things about early-ish One Piece was discovering the unique powers of the villains of any given arc and then being so intimidated because like, oh my god, we have no idea how we could beat this Lightning Man or this Smoke Man or this Sand Man with the Sandstorm powers. But discovering that along the course of the arc, that's what I fucking loved. These little mysteries that we develop and expand to watch an empire crumble like it did with Baroque Works. However, now that we have Haki, those mysteries are no longer relevant. Sure, there's characters like Magellan, who we needed to use Mr. 3's wax power so that Luffy wouldn't die and lose his fist to the poison that he would inevitably have to come in contact with since he's a punchy boy. But I mean, if Luffy finishes this development of this new Rayleigh-style non-contact Haki, maybe he wouldn't need to touch Magellan, and there would be no problems at all. The point simply is that one of my favorite aspects of the series was unfortunately kind of done away with by the addition of this ability. And that's the real point I'm trying to make in this video. This is what I mourn. And to this point, I know that there's going to be people who say that, bestie boy, Luffy is basically Yonko tier now. He's in the big leagues. He needs to be able to take down mooks who happen to have a Logia fruit, and he needs to be able to realistically look like he can be Pirate King. Our small time adventuring is over, and it's time that we deal with the big political threats. That's what One Piece is about now. And you know what? I honestly cannot disagree. One Piece is indeed a fine wine, and to this day, it is still my favorite series of all time. I continue to be delighted by it week after week, even though it has these problems, because there's so much more good than bad. And in that way, One Piece is like a fine wine that has matured. It doesn't have the character it had when it first started, not in the exact same way. We don't go to an island with no information about it and explore the world and find out the unique geography and climate. We've entered a new era where it's politics driven. It's we know what Luffy needs to do. He's got to gather those real fucking poneglyphs. That means he's got to take down Big Mom. He's got to take down Kaido and do whatever's necessary because we're in the end game now. And I've accepted it. Honestly, I have. This isn't meant to be morbid. This isn't meant to be sad, but One Piece is nearing the end of its lifespan. We've got a few 5 years left in it. I am happy to gracefully let One Piece retire. However, I don't want the lessons that we have learned along the way to go to waste. So who I'm speaking to is not Eiichiro Oda, who frankly is a god, who I would do nothing but praise endlessly if he was before me, as one of the most important people in my life. He taught me about friendship, he taught me about adventure, he taught me about what it means to be a real man, and no, I'm not crying! But when you and me, the creators of tomorrow, go on and make our stories, don't lose sight of the thing that makes your adventure great. If there was a point to this video, it would simply be think about these things ahead of time so you don't have to make the retcons later. And frankly, you might say I'm being too harsh by hoping that a 20-year-long series, one of the longest in history and the best in history, could have planned out even more ahead of time and predicted these issues that would come along. That might be asking too much. But however, you and I can learn from its example, so we don't make the same mistakes in our story. And I understand that many of you won't even consider these mistakes, but I would, and I am not afraid to say that to anyone who would ask. And it does not make me any less of a fan. I would argue it makes me more of a fan, because I am willing to hold the series to account and critique it on the little errors within the vast, glorious empire that is One Piece. One Piece is about personal treasure, right? Behind all the pomp and circumstance, that's what it's always been about from the very start. And you know what my treasure is? It's getting to read One Piece every week with you people. I can't say I'm much into fandoms, but being part of a community that comes together to theorize, discuss, predict, and analyze the shit out of every One Piece chapter has been one of the most consistent running elements in my life and one that's brought me the most joy. So I'm not fucking stopping, baby. Subscribe to the podcast for weekly shit talking of me on the little nitpicks I have of One Piece while I remind you constantly that it's the greatest thing that's ever been written. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I will leave it there for this day of MIAMAFV 2. Treasure the things that are important to you in life and don't let them slip away. I'll see you tomorrow.